Hi, welcome to Tiggs Creations. In this episode, what I want to do is show you the process that I use for doing custom epoxy inlays on a live edge charcuterie riverboard. I have already done an episode on how I make up the riverboard, so the first step I'm skipping, and then here I'm just going to show you how I take the board, process it for doing the custom inlays, engraving, and then the end product. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you like and subscribe. I'll talk to you soon. As you can see, I use high density polyethylene molds to pour out my riverboards. Takes an easy little tap to get the boards out of the mold. But what you'll see is that they actually have excess epoxy on either sides and the top and bottom. I've shown the preparation of these boards in an earlier video for Tiggs Creations, so you can find the build there, but the next thing to do is obviously just trim off the excess epoxy on all four sides of the board. I use compound miter saw to do the tops and the bottoms, and then transfer over to my table saw to do the sides. The next stage is to trim off the excess epoxy on the top and bottom of the board, and for this I use my jet belt sander, which is an absolute godsend. It's also an absolutely essential part of this build. Because we're going to be doing CNC milling, it's important that the upper and lower sides are completely parallel and that the surface is flat across the top, because we're going to be doing engraving only to a tolerance of about 1/8 of an inch. The next stage in the build was to bring up the design software. I'm here using Vectric VCarve Desktop. It's a really flexible program that allows you to do some very elegant vector graphics and then output code for controlling CNC machines. So here, as you can see, I've sort of like laid out the two images that I pulled down from the net. Put in the text for the particular place I was making the sign for. Once you go over into this other side of the design, you can have a look and see exactly what's going to happen here. So here I'm using a 90-degree bit. You can say, well, what's that going to do? And it will show you. You can then say, well, okay, show me what that's going to look like once the bit has done its thing. And there you can see that it really gives you quite a clear idea of what you're going to do. You can then have a look and see how long the job's going to take, and then you can export these pathway files, as they're called, out in G-code, which is the code that allows you to control your routed system or software. You save your G-code files, and then you open up your router control system. In my case, I'm using GSender. So you open up GSender, and what it does is that it will connect with your router through the drive manager system. So you click connect to your carver, your machine, and it says you're connected. For some reason it always wants to tell me to home my machine, but for the purposes of this, you just unlock. You look for the file that you've just downloaded. You can click in the first couple of letters and you pull up the profile file that you just made for the outline of the state of Georgia, and here you go. You can see exactly where it's going to be. You set your start point and then you hit start, and then the CNC will go in and carve out that system. So here's it in operation now. This is the CNC receiving the code for the lettering, and this is speeded up. I think it's about 6 times real speed, but you can see exactly what the program's doing. The next thing to do was fill in the lettering with epoxy. Here I'm using Total Boat tabletop epoxy and an alcohol based black dye. I like the alcohol base particularly because it gives a much fuller black color rather than using mica, which sometimes in thin layers can be a bit transparent. So then it's just literally a question of mixing up the epoxy, using a spatula to fill in the individual letters and running this through to the end of the design. As you maybe noticed at the beginning, what you have to do is run a torch over the lettering and epoxy just to remove any bubbles that might have surfaced during the pouring. The next thing to do was sand down the excess epoxy using 120 through 220 grit sandpaper. Having finished the sanding, I next gave it a quick wipe down with mineral spirits to see what the final product was going to look like. Next up came rounding off the edges on the top and the bottom surface using a 1/2 inch round over bit. I then finished off the sanding up to 320 grit, ready for putting on some oil and wax. The finish that I used for the project was Osmo, which is an oil wax finish which gives a really nice result after 1 or 2 coatings. There you go, that's the story of how I put epoxy inlay into my live edge charcuterie riverboards. Pretty much you can put any logo or name or anything in there, and I've just seen a great YouTube video by a guy, Shane's Hardwoods, doing amazing multiple epoxy color inlays. So I'm hoping to have a try at that, but that's what I do at the moment, and I can obviously do anything for anybody who might be interested in having an epoxy inlay on a charcuterie board. As it turned out, the people that I made the sign for weren't so amazingly interested, even though I gave it to them as a freebie. But there you go, you win some, you lose some. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.